Hey guys, my name is Lauren Boone and I'm here for NOI Education Services. It's a day ending in Y, so we are talking about best practice for assessment. Guys, if you want more of this type of information, by all means, please do like and subscribe, and you will also find a range of other videos because I have been talking about this topic since a long time ago. And today we are following on from validity. If you didn't get to catch that video, by all means, jump on and watch that before you watch this one, because today we're going to be talking about sufficiency. And validity and sufficiency are probably two of the ones that I think they often go together. They are quite misunderstood. I think we see within the sufficiency space, what we often see is we see people going for the quantity over quality, right? So when it comes to validity, people don't understand that if you're asked to do a skill, you have to actually do the skill. I don't know how that is. And I'm hoping that the vast majority of you looking and watching this video are like, yeah, I mean, obviously that's really, really common sense. How would somebody not understand that? But with sufficiency, people tend to go for the quantity over the quality. So I've had arguments over the years where people have said, oh no, you must have a minimum of 2 pieces of evidence against every single criteria. And I've successfully taken assessment tools through audits with one really good piece of evidence. I've had people that go, well, you have to have a question and a task against, every criteria. And I'm like, well, actually, no, if it's a skill, you can just assess them as a skill. You don't need to assess them. You don't need to assess knowledge. We at NOI, our assessment approach is actually generally that we really will only develop knowledge questions against the knowledge evidence, or against like particular performance criteria where it uses those sorts of keywords like identify, explain, discuss. We will not put a knowledge question against a really practical criteria because it's not relevant, right? It's underpinning knowledge. That's great. We might do that in a formative. We might do that within the training. But really, when it comes to the summative assessment, what we look for there is we look for what knowledge that we have to evidence, right? And we don't want to be over assessing our students on knowledge because God knows the vast majority of training packages have far too much knowledge in them anyway, and half of it is really not relevant to a lot of the skills. Sometimes, you've got in every single unit, you've got work safely, you've got identify, you've got plan, you've got like all of this stuff in there. And what happens is that you don't, like, trainers then don't have enough time to actually focus on the skill part of it. So hopefully we will actually start to see that a little bit better in some of the new training packages that are coming out under the new TPOF format. And I'm going to be doing another video about that coming out in hopefully July or August. So make sure you're subscribed to this channel so that you don't miss it. But let's get into sufficiency. So sufficiency sits under the rules of evidence. Under the 2025 standards, it's defined as the quality, quantity, and relevance of assessment evidence that enables a judgment of competency to be made. And that phrase there, quality, quantity, and relevance, has been in the RTO standards it's been in there for at least 2015. And I think it was actually possibly in there beforehand, but I can't remember that off the top of my head. So that is what we are going to be talking about today. Now, in the assessment ASQA best practice guide, which if you guys haven't downloaded the practice guides, I will link to them below. But what it says in there is that you are able to show how you ensure sufficiency in assessment judgments, for example, by ensuring assessors, 1, gather enough evidence to make a valid judgment of competence or otherwise. So that goes back to validity. We've done that in a previous episode. If you guys haven't seen that, I do highly recommend that you go back and you watch that episode. And additionally, adjust the quantity of evidence gathered as required. Some students may take longer or need to complete a greater number of tasks to demonstrate competence. Others may not be able to achieve competence despite related opportunities. So this is quite different to what we have seen in the past. And I look, to be honest, I question this one a little bit. And the reason for that is that this is, to me, what formative assessment is for. So by the time we come to summative assessment, you should have a relatively good idea that the student is going to be capable Now, it does very much, I think that very much depends on the way that you're delivering your courses. So it becomes a lot more difficult in your short courses. So like, your first aids, your, working at heights, your forklift tickets and things like that, whereby you've got your students for a much shorter period of time, and you've got therefore you've got less of a period to be able to develop a relationship with them. But to be honest, under the new standards, one of the things that has been better articulated is the requirement to ensure that you're giving them a good amount of training. And that, through that training, you're providing them with instruction, practice, feedback. And so that instruction, practice, and feedback is all your formative, like that can be a lot of your formative assessment and training that happens through that process. And then by the time you come to your summative, you should be relatively confident that your students are going to get to that point. At least that's my personal feeling on it. Obviously, that's not the advice provided through the guide, but that's my personal. So again, we're going to say here that depending on the students that we're working with, it may take longer, and that's absolutely true. But what we're looking for here is we're looking for a relevant quality, quantity, and relevance of assessment evidence. Now, guys, I'm just going to say this. I'm potentially going to say this multiple times throughout this podcast. Quantity does not make up for quality. All right. If you've got 6 crap pieces of assessment that barely link to the criteria, that does not make up for it. And we see this like quite often when we go through assessment tools, and I see a lot of overmapping that occurs. And what I think people do here is they look at a criteria and they go, oh, well, they could demonstrate competency through that task. Like the assessor could see it, or they go, oh, well, like it links to part of it, because some of our performance criteria and knowledge evidence and performance evidence, knowledge evidence, they're written quite badly. And especially sometimes they're quite expanded. So you've got like 5 or 6 like separate things that are forming one criteria, which is it's certainly not ideal. It does make the job of curriculum developers a lot harder. But what I will say there is that anything that you put into your mapping guide, there should be a very clear, explicit link to how that evidence matches the criteria. Okay. So, if the skill is to paint a wall, then a question about the steps that you need to take to paint a wall, I wouldn't personally be including in there. Okay. I might include it if the question is, if the criteria is, outline the stages of wall painting, or, describe the procedures for painting a wall or something like that. Like if that's the criteria, then yes, a question is fine. But if the criteria is a direct skill of paint a wall, then my assessment is going to be, I've got instructions to a student that they need to paint a wall. And this is the size of the wall. And, this is the, like normally in the painting package, it's like so many square meters, right? So you need to paint, 24 square meters of this wall using this technique, right? Roller, brush, or whatever, spray, and you need to do it to industry standard. Okay. So that's what I'm going to tell a student, right? Then there is going to be a observation checklist, and the observation checklist is going to have as one of the criteria, the student painted 24 square meters of wall, okay, to industry standard. All right. And then I'm going to describe what the industry standard looks like. Okay. So nice, even finish, no drip marks, full coverage. And I might even include, needs to have completed it within a certain time frame, right? Because if it took them 3 hours to, paint a wall of 24 square meters, I would be like, serious? Like that's like, if it's a flat wall, no, that shouldn't take anywhere near that long. So that's my reliable benchmark I'm going to, where I'm actually describing exactly what that should look like. And that's the agreed like quality standard that we've got for the business. We're going to be talking about that more when we go into reliability, but I'm gonna do that, and then maybe I'm gonna take a photo, or maybe I've got a video of the student doing it, or maybe I have got maybe the assessor is going to make a comment on the quality of it, or maybe the student is going to fill out a form, denoting when they painted it, where they painted it, did they run into any challenges, what did they think about the quality finish of the product, right? So I generally try to pair like if I'm doing a straight observation, if it is a really direct observational sort of a task, I generally do try and pair some sort of additional evidence with it. Only because in my experience, and again, everyone's audit experience is different. So, different consultants, different curriculum developers may have a different approach to this. However, in general, most of the good quality guys that I know that I refer people to or that I work with, we have an observation, right? A tick observation. We have a really good quality benchmark that sits underneath that where we describe what it looks like. And then we have a supporting piece of evidence that, is some additional evidence that the student's actually done it, so that the ASQA auditor doesn't tell us that they don't believe anything that we say. They don't believe what our trainers and assessors say, and it's just a tick and flick assessment, right? And I say that because, if that's all you're going to have is an observation checklist, and if you're dumb enough to have an observation checklist, which is literally just a copy and paste of the performance criteria with no benchmarks as to what it looks like, okay, well, that's fine. If you want to be lazy, but when the ASQA assessor says that your assessment tools are non-compliant and you probably deserve to be shut down, then I'm not going to disagree with them, because like in 2025, it's so easy to create better benchmarks that's just not acceptable. Like it wasn't acceptable in 2017. It's sure as hell not acceptable now. So that's kind of the approach that we tend to take. And through that process, the assessor can turn around, or I can turn around as somebody who's designed the assessment tool, and I can say, what's enough evidence? Well, I've got some sort of supporting piece of evidence to make sure that the students contributed and that they've outlined what they've done. Or I've got a really good assessor comment there. I've got the actual observation noted and signed off by the assessor. We've documented like when and where it's happened, like we've got a couple of other things. The sole tick is not going to be enough, but if you pair that with some additional evidence, then that's going to work really well. Okay. If the question is, if it's a knowledge evidence, and the knowledge evidence is, tell me what the state, like describe the hierarchy to me, or explain the different steps in the hierarchy of control, right? And I ask them a good question about that. That's sufficient, right? Now, in the day and age of AI, we may then have a practical task that's further going to see how they apply the hierarchy of control in a, risk assessment, right? Because anytime hierarchy of control is the knowledge evidence, then later on down the track, you're going to be utilizing that knowledge evidence to apply your skills, right? So the direct evidence that the student has that is going to be the question, right? That's it. I'm just going to do the question. But then further down the track for that, from an authenticity perspective, I might turn around and say, yes, however, the student will then apply that knowledge in this particular context. Now, whether or not they have the knowledge is different to how they apply it. And so I'm not going to include it in my mapping guide, right? In my mapping guide, I'm going to be very clear and very explicit, and I'm always going to go with a quality over quantity approach, because if I put 10 things into that mapping guide that link to that criteria, now 2 of them are really good quality and 8 of them are loose connections where, I'm going to struggle to even remember when I'm sitting in front of the auditor how I came up with that, right? Then what the auditor is naturally going to see is that they're going to see that you've got 6 links in there that are really fucking loose. Right? Or they might pick 2 of those and go, well, hold on a second. I'm auditing you. the first 3 criteria that we've gone through, right? You've got 6 things mapped in there, but the first 3 that we've talked about, there's no link in there whatsoever. It's not actually any evidence of this. Therefore, you don't understand assessment. Therefore, you don't have a good assessment system. Therefore, it's non-compliant. And I can stop there because I've already proven that you don't understand what good assessment practice is, right? This is a really common outcome that we see at audits where people are utilizing assessment tools that are over mapped. Quality over quantity, guys, okay? Sufficiency means you've gathered enough evidence to make a valid judgment of competence. Don't over collect. Don't over map in the hopes that if you've got 27 things on there, that's going to show that your assessment's really robust. It doesn't. In fact, it makes it a hell of a lot easier for me to prove that it's not robust because I can go through the first 6 of 8 criteria and prove that they barely link up, right? So we want to be making sure that we're going with quality over quantity. If you guys find that all of this is a little bit overwhelming and you would rather have somebody else developing your assessments for you, say Anawire Education Services, you can give us a call. You can send us an email to Lauren or Laura at anawire.org. I hope you guys have found this one interesting. We are going to be jumping into reliability next, one of my favorites. I hope you guys have enjoyed this series. If you haven't watched the other ones, I will link to those below. By all means, like, subscribe, do all of those good things. You can also disagree with me, but just do so respectfully, and I'm happy to duke it out with you. I hope you guys have had an amazing day. My name is Lauren Boone for Anawire Education Services.